It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where every house looked eerily similar, but held its own unique story behind perfectly trimmed hedges and neatly parked cars. The Miller family had moved in just a week ago, their boxes still half unpacked, the faint smell of fresh paint lingering in the air. The house was bigger than they were used to, a sprawling 2-story home with a wraparound porch and windows that seemed to invite the golden rays of the afternoon sun. It was a fresh start, a new chapter, and everyone seemed eager to settle in. Emma Miller, the eldest daughter, was a typical teenager, 15, perpetually glued to her phone and navigating the uncertain waters of adolescence. She had claimed the room at the far end of the upstairs hallway, the one with the large bay window overlooking the backyard. The view wasn't much, just a thick cluster of trees that bordered the property, but she liked the way the sunlight poured in during the mornings. Her parents, Rebecca and Daniel, had taken the master bedroom down the hall, while her younger brother Noah, a rambunctious 9-year-old, was ecstatic about his room being close to the staircase. It was all so normal, so ordinary, like a picture-perfect family in the suburbs. Their days quickly fell into routine. Rebecca, a freelance graphic designer, worked from home, her laptop perched on the kitchen island. The kitchen was the heart of the house, open, airy, with white cabinets and gleaming countertops that seemed perpetually spotless despite Noah's constant snacking. Daniel, an engineer, left early every morning and returned just in time for dinner. Emma and Noah would walk to the nearby school, taking the same route every day, past the neighbors' rose bushes and the small park at the corner. The house itself seemed alive in a way new homes often do, pipes groaning with the occasional rush of water, floors creaking in protest under hurried footsteps. The first few nights Rebecca thought she heard faint noises upstairs when everyone was asleep, but she dismissed them as the house settling. Daniel teased her about being paranoid, and they laughed it off, never thinking much of it. By the weekend, the house had started to feel more like home. Boxes were unpacked, photos were hung, and the Millers began to host their first normal family dinners in the cozy dining room. On Sunday evenings, Emma would retreat to her room, sitting cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through her phone, while the muffled sound of Noah's cartoons echoed faintly down the hall. She liked the quiet moments before bedtime, when the house was still and the world outside seemed far away. It was on one such evening that Emma first noticed it. A small thing, really, barely worth mentioning. Her window latch, which she was sure she'd locked earlier, was slightly ajar. She didn't think much of it, closing it with a faint click and brushing it off as her mistake. After all, it was an old house, and latches could be tricky sometimes. She didn't tell anyone. Why would she? It was nothing, just the kind of harmless detail that fades into the blur of daily life. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. The neighborhood was calm, its silence broken only by the occasional hum of passing cars or the distant bark of a dog. Inside, the Millers were safe, warm, and unaware of the shadows that seemed to stretch just a little too long across the backyard as the moon climbed higher in the sky. The days went on, blending into one another with the predictable rhythm of family life. Emma barely thought about the window latch after that first night. It was just one of those things, like when the fridge made an odd hum, or a door didn't close quite right. Little quirks of a house adjusting to its new occupants. But then, it happened again. One evening, as Emma was getting ready for bed, she noticed it. Her window, once again slightly ajar. A chill crept through the narrow gap, making the curtains sway, just enough to catch her eye. She frowned. Had she forgotten to lock it again? She was sure she hadn't opened it that day. A quick glance at the lock showed no visible damage, nothing out of place. Just open. This time she hesitated before closing it, fingers lingering on the latch. She pressed it down, feeling the solid click, and even tugged on the frame to be sure. It stayed shut. Satisfied, she turned away, brushing the thought aside. Maybe she had left it unlocked without realizing. It wasn't worth overthinking. Still, that night, sleep didn't come easily. There was a stillness in the air, something almost too quiet. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, but expectant. Every small creak of the house felt amplified, every distant rustle outside, making her ears strain for more. Even the glow of her phone screen did little to chase away the strange sense of unease creeping in at the edges of her mind. The next morning, she nearly laughed at herself. She was being ridiculous. It was just a window. Except it wasn't just the window anymore. Over the next few days, she started noticing other small things. Her bedroom door, which she always left slightly open at night, would be fully shut in the morning. The chair at her desk, usually tucked neatly under, would be slightly pulled out. At first, she blamed Noah. Her little brother had a habit of wandering into her room when she wasn't around. But when she confronted him at breakfast, he only gave her a confused look, mouth still full of cereal. "I didn't go in your room," he mumbled through a mouthful. "I swear." Their mother chimed in from the sink, rinsing out her coffee mug. "He's been sleeping like a rock lately. Maybe you're just moving things without thinking." Emma wanted to argue, but what would she even say? That she was sure her door was open when she went to bed, that she knew exactly how she left her chair. It sounded ridiculous even in her own head. She let it go, but the feeling didn't. That evening she double-checked everything before bed. The window was locked, the door left open just a crack, her desk chair neatly pushed in. And yet, when she woke up the next morning, the door was closed. The chair was out again, and this time, the window latch wasn't just unlocked. It was unlatched, open, just enough for something, to slip through. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the window, the latch unhooked, the faintest sliver of cold air creeping into her room. Her heart pounded against her ribs, each beat heavy, echoing in her ears. This wasn't her imagination. It wasn't Noah. It wasn't the house settling. Something, or someone, had been here. Slowly, she slid out of bed, her bare feet pressing against the cool wooden floor. The room was still, bathed in the pale glow of the streetlight filtering through the window. Every shadow felt too deep. Every corner, too dark. She reached for her phone, gripping it like a lifeline, her fingers trembling as she turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the floor, her desk, the chair, still slightly pulled out. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps as she approached the window. She hesitated, then pressed her fingers against the glass, peering outside. The backyard stretched into the trees, silent, unmoving. The wind had died down. The night was unnaturally still. And then, movement. A figure, just beyond the tree line. Emma's pulse spiked. She couldn't see clearly, only the vaguest shape shifting in the shadows, watching. She stumbled backward, her throat tightening. Her mind screamed at her to wake her parents, to call someone, to do anything but stand there frozen. But before she could move, the floor creaked. Behind her, a breath, soft, barely there, tickled the back of her neck. not hers. Emma spun around, flashlight whipping across the room. Empty. The door was still shut. The room was the same as before. But something was wrong. The air was different. Heavy. Thick. With something unseen. The small hairs on her arms stood on end, her skin prickling with an instinctive dread she couldn't explain. And then, another sound. Not a creak. Not the wind. A whisper. Faint. Just above a breath. Right next to her ear. Her phone slipped from her grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud, the flashlight beam rolling wildly across the ceiling. She wasn't alone. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps, her chest tightening with each shallow inhale. The room felt different now, like something had shifted in the air itself. The warmth of sleep had long since faded, replaced by an unnatural cold that pressed against her skin, seeping into her bones. Her phone lay on the floor, its flashlight still on, the beam of light swinging wildly as the device spun to a stop. It illuminated only fragments, the edge of her bed, the base of the door, the corner of her desk. But each object felt unfamiliar, distorted in the unsteady glow. She swallowed hard, forcing her muscles to move. She needed to get out. Slowly, she bent down, reaching for her phone with shaking fingers. The moment her fingertips brushed against the cold surface, a sound, a wet, slow inhale. Not hers. Emma froze. It was behind her. Every nerve in her body screamed to run, to move, to do something, anything. But her limbs refused to obey. The room stretched into silence, thick and suffocating. The kind of silence that made her ears strain for even the smallest noise. And then, a creak, directly behind her. Emma's breath caught in her throat, her fingers tightening around the phone as she slowly, so slowly, turned her head. The flashlight beam rolled upward, sweeping across the floor, the desk, the wall. And then it hit something. A shape, too tall, too thin, standing in the farthest corner of the room where the shadows were deepest. Emma's stomach dropped. Her throat clenched around a silent scream. It wasn't just a figure. It was wrong. The way it stood, slightly hunched, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its arms, too long, hung limp at its sides, fingers curling slightly as if testing movement. But the worst part, its face wasn't visible. The flashlight flickered. The air grew colder. And then, it moved. Emma's body went rigid, every muscle locked in place as the thing in the corner shifted. The movement was subtle, almost hesitant, like it was testing its own existence within the room. The shadows clung to its form, swallowing the details, but she could feel its presence, an unbearable weight pressing against her chest, suffocating. Her breath came in short, silent gasps, her heartbeat a frantic rhythm in her ears. She didn't want to see its face. She knew, deep in the part of her mind that still grasped at logic, that if she saw it, if she truly looked, it would change something irreversible. The flashlight flickered again, and for a fraction of a second, the beam caught the edge of its form. A glimpse, the outline of a face. No features, just smooth, pale skin stretched too tightly over a shape that should have been human. Emma's stomach twisted. She staggered backward, her heels hitting the leg of her bed. The thing twitched at the motion, its fingers flexing. She needed to move. Now. She spun, lunging for the door, fingers fumbling at the handle. It wouldn't turn. Stuck. Locked from the inside. No. No. Behind her, the sound of something dragging against the floor. Slow. Deliberate. Her mind screamed at her to act. She slammed her fist against the door, her voice finally breaking free in a strangled, desperate whisper. Mom. The light went out. Total darkness swallowed the room. The air shifted. A breath right against her ear. Then, nothing. Silence. Emma's fingers trembled against the doorknob. She couldn't hear anything, couldn't feel anything. Just the oppressive weight of the dark pressing in from all sides. And then, suddenly, light. Warm, golden morning light. Emma blinked. She was in her bed. The window was closed. The latch locked. The chair was tucked neatly under her desk. Her phone lay undisturbed on the nightstand, the battery still full. It was morning. Her room was exactly as it should be. A dream. It had to be. A nightmare. She sat up slowly, her limbs still weak, her heart still hammering. The house was silent, except for the distant hum of the coffee maker downstairs. Shaky breaths escaped her lips as she tried to laugh at herself. Just a bad dream. Nothing was different. Nothing had happened. Her eyes flickered to the door. It was still slightly ajar, the way she always left it. But something was wrong. The door frame, the paint near the handle. 4 long, deep scratches ran down the wood. Too high for Noah. Too fresh to have always been there. The latch on the window clicked softly. Unlocked.